everyone and welcome back to my channel. For today's video, I will be talking about my favorite movies of all time. So I recently did a video on my favorite TV shows and my favorite books of all time, so I will link both of those videos down below. I also thought it was time to do an updated video on my favorite movies of all time. I first did this video back in September of 2018. I will link that first video down below if you want to watch it. I'm going to go from number 10 to number 1. I decided to stop this list straight at number 10 because I was trying to maybe have like a top 12 or like a top 15, but when it came down to writing the list of all of my favorite movies, I realized I don't have more than 10. Like there's other movies I like, but I don't consider them like favorites that I would rewatch over and over again. I also want to say a lot of these movies are not like award-winning movies. They, are kind of considered bad movies, but I love them. They mean a lot to me, and this is just my personal taste. All of these movies are just movies that I can rewatch over and over again and never get sick of them, and they just have a huge sentimental meaning to me. I also just have very fond memories of watching all of these movies, and that has really stuck with me. Coming in at number 10 is a classic childhood favorite, and that is The Little Mermaid. I love The Little Mermaid so much. It is still one of my favorite movies. I probably rewatch it at least once a year. I loved it as a kid. Ariel has always been my favorite princess. Even though I'm such a romance fan, I love romance stories, I actually don't really care that much about the romance in The Little Mermaid. I love Eric and Ariel together, obviously, but it's not the reason why I love this movie. I think I just related a lot to Ariel as a kid. And I don't know, like I'm a Pisces, I love fish, I love water. I know it's kind of weird, but I feel like that's kind of why I related to like Ariel and just loved her story. I loved the music in the movie. All of the songs I love. Such a classic movie and forever a favorite. I feel like for a lot of these movies, I'm not really going to have much to say because I'm not really going to give summaries. I feel like all of these movies are pretty popular, or you've at least heard of them. This next one I might actually have to explain. So coming in at number 9 is Through My Window. This is a new favorite. This is on Netflix. It is an adaptation of the book by Ariana Godoy. This is a teen romance movie. It follows Raquel, who has had a long time crush on her next door neighbor, and it finally turns into something more when he starts developing feelings for her too. But unfortunately, his family has other plans for him. I read the book earlier this year and I enjoyed it, but I loved the movie. The movie is not the greatest. It doesn't really follow the book that well. I mean, the beginning half of it does, but the rest of the movie kind of goes on its own. I loved this movie for what it was. I really enjoyed the actors. I really enjoyed the directing. I also really enjoyed the soundtrack, and I liked the actors. I thought the actors did a really, really good job. I think that is why this movie worked for me, was the two main actors. They have so much chemistry, and I genuinely feel like it held the movie together. I also forgot to mention this movie is technically a Spanish movie. I have watched both versions, the Spanish version and then the English dubbed version. I love both of them. The Spanish version, I feel like you get to feel their chemistry a little bit more because, it's their natural voices and you get to associate their voices with their acting. Whereas the dubbed version, it does sound like a little off, but I still have enjoyed both versions. I really didn't expect to love this movie that much. I just thought I was going to watch it and kind of move on, but I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I have watched it countless times now. Coming in at number 8, we have Uptown Girls. I don't think I've ever talked about this movie, and it has been years since I've watched it, but I used to watch this movie all of the time as a kid. I absolutely loved this movie. I still have very fond memories of watching this movie, and there's very specific scenes I always remember. This movie made me feel all of the emotions. I laughed, I cried. It's just such a classic movie, and I really need to rewatch it because it has been forever, but I've always considered this one of my favorite movies. Coming in at number 7, The Nice Guys. This was also a movie I did not expect to like. but the first time I saw it, I fell in love with it. I loved the mixture of comedy and action, loved all the performances from the actors. I also loved the setting of this movie. It takes place in the 1970s in LA. Aesthetically, this movie is just beautiful. It's also at times a very bizarre and weird movie, but I feel like it works. I'm not big on action movies. I do think they're fun once in a while, but there's not many that I feel like stay with me, and this one I have just watched countless times. I really loved everything about it. Coming in at number 6 is another classic, and that is Gone Girl. I genuinely really loved this movie. I have also read and loved the book. The author did write the screenplay for this movie, so it was very accurate to the book, which is something I really appreciated. I feel like there's not much I can say about this movie that does it justice because it is a award-winning movie and very critically acclaimed. Obviously, I loved the acting and the overall atmosphere of the movie. I think they really captured the vibe of the book. I thought it was really fast-paced, but also slow at the same time. Obviously, it's a really good movie, and it is one of my favorites. Coming in at number 5, we have the Mortal Instruments City of Bones. This is another young adult story based on the books by Cassandra Clare. I really loved this movie. It didn't really follow the book that well, but again, I loved this movie for what it was. I love Lily Collins and Jamie Campbell Bower as Jason Clary. I thought they were perfect. I loved all the action and fight scenes in this movie. I thought they did a fantastic job with all the CGI and special effects. The whole atmosphere and vibe of this movie I really love. It's very dark and mysterious. If you aren't really familiar with the Mortal Instruments City of Bones, it just follows Clary, whose mother ends up disappearing, and she discovers she's a part of this world that is supposed to hunt and kill demons, and she gets wrapped up in what they call the shadow world, and she's also trying to find her mother and figure out what is going on. Coming in at number 4, we have Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I was debating if I should include all of the Harry Potters on this list. I mean, obviously I love all of them, but I decided to just pick one, and my favorite out of all of them is Prisoner of Azkaban. I have only read the first 3 books, but obviously I've seen all the movies and I've rewatched them at least once a year. Again, there's something about the whole vibe of this movie. It's very blue. It's a little bit darker. I just really enjoyed the storyline that this movie had. The time turner was very interesting. There's just something about this movie that feels so different compared to all the other movies. There were lots of funny and heartfelt moments. Yeah, this is my favorite movie in the entire series, and I can pretty much quote the entire movie. I love it that much. Honestly, my top 3 were really hard for me to pick. I honestly don't know if number 1 is my favorite. I feel like it is, but I don't know. I feel like either one of these top 3 could be mixed up. But coming in at number 3 is After. This is probably not a surprise to a lot of people. I love the After movies. I love the whole After franchise. I read the books like 4 or 5 times, and I've watched this first movie countless times. If you aren't familiar with After, it just follows our female character Tessa, who ends up falling in love with Hardin, who is a bad boy with a dark secret, and they end up having a very rocky relationship. So far, the first movie is still my favorite in the franchise. I think it's movie 1, then the third movie, After We Fell. Those are my favorite. I refuse to acknowledge After We Collided. I don't like anything from that movie. There might be 1 or 2 things I like from the second movie, but I honestly just pretend it doesn't exist. The first movie doesn't really follow the books that well. It has a lot of similarities. I feel like the characters are somewhat similar. Hardin is definitely toned down in the first movie compared to the books, but I feel like Tessa was very true to book Tessa, and I just loved the actors. This first movie doesn't really show their acting abilities. However, I love their chemistry. I think they truly have a lot of chemistry. I just loved the soundtrack. I loved the directing of this movie. I loved pretty much every single scene that they had in this movie. Like, there was not one scene that I hated or that I thought was awkward or weird. Also, this movie just means a lot to me. Like, I watched it 3 times in theaters, which I have never done before. I also went to go see this movie twice by myself, which I also had never done before. It is very cheesy, but I just loved it. I also think I have such an attachment to this movie because I do love the books, and I just grew to love this movie and appreciate it for what it is. And even though I did end up loving the third movie, this first one will just always have a special place in my heart, and I could not put it on my favorite list. At number 2 on my list is Twilight. Of course, I had to include a Twilight movie. I decided to just go with the first one. Sorry, I had to quickly change my battery, so if the angle is weird, I apologize. I just love Twilight so much. I am very much emotionally attached to the books and the movies. I have very fond and vivid memories of watching the first movie and buying all the books and reading all of them. I feel like collectively Twilight is a movie that is very much hated on and described as a bad movie, but I love it. I love everything about it. I love the acting. I love the soundtrack. I love the vibe and setting and the whole atmosphere of the movie. It's very gloomy and very blue. I love blue-toned movies. That is one of my favorite things ever. I love the color blue. It's my favorite color. There's so many iconic scenes in this movie. I could quote this movie as well. I know it so well. I could not even tell you how many times I've seen this movie, but I never get sick of it, and I feel like it's always going to be one of my favorite movies. Coming in at number 1, this is my favorite movie of all time, and that is Moulin Rouge. This one I wasn't really sure if it is my favorite or if like Twilight or After is my favorite movie, but I feel like this is my favorite movie. It's got so many qualities that I love in movies: romance, a little bit of comedy, music numbers, and lots of music, a little bit of weirdness, beautiful and interesting directing and cinematography choices, amazing acting, and perfect chemistry. I just loved the romance and the story, and I also loved how tragic it was. This movie always makes me sad, like it always makes me cry. I feel like this is also another movie that my words will not do it any justice. I just love it, and it is my favorite movie of all time. So that was it for my top 10 favorite movies of all time. Let me know if you have seen any of these movies and what you think about them. Also, let me know what your favorite movies of all time are. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to give this video a like, subscribe, follow me on all my other social media, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.